assets being held by the private sector banks. The other point, so and 0.2 percentage of the M2 money supply that's in the form of bank notes. 42% of the M2 money supply. Now this is higher even than less developed countries like Sudan and Ethiopia. Majority of households don't have a bank account. So from this we can see, one thing we can see is a tremendous potential for banking in Iraq, starting from such a low base. So these two features, the dominance of the state sector and the very high share of cash outside the banking sector, I think accounts for the particular characteristics of how these private sector banks operate. And on is the question of why do the Iraqi banks hold, why do they have very large amounts of cash on their balance sheet compared to banks elsewhere? So here I'm just subsidiaries of foreign banks, cash and reserves to deposit ratio with the same ratio for the foreign parent of the subsidiary. And this one is from 2014, so we still have Dar es Salaam Bank here. The parent at that time was HSBC, which has subsequently withdrawn from the bank. But the point anyway is that for the Iraqi subsidiaries, they all have, all but one have a ratio above 60%, while none of the parent companies have ratio higher than 30%. So the question that the foreign investor, if you are an Iraqi banker and someday a foreign investor you to find out about the bank, the thing that this guy is going to be wondering is there's so much cash, and what you don't want him to go at, it's because the Iraqi bankers are really bad at cash management. What the foreign investor needs to understand is it's not bad cash management, it's lack of the cash management tools that are available in other countries. And one of these is an active interbank market. If you ask the Iraqi banker, why do you hold so much cash, he will say, it's because we never know when there'll be a large unexpected withdrawal from a depositor. But the thing is, that's true for banks everywhere. Why is it? What's different here? So the thing that's missing, I think, is an active interbank market. If you have an active interbank market, okay, suppose there's a large unexpected. Well, what happens? Suppose there's just these two banks and only one transaction happens on this particular day. So the money goes from the buyer's bank to the seller's bank. At the end of the day, the bank has a deficit and the seller's bank has a surplus, but this doesn't create a liquidity crisis for the buyer's bank because they can borrow overnight from the seller's bank. So at the end of each day, all of the cash, all of the funds are in the banking system somewhere, and they can be lent among the banks to correct for imbalances due to unexpected large. But the Iraqi case is different for two reasons. Is that a lot of times the money, the bond from the first bank are not in the banking sector. Instead, they remain in safes or hidden in someone's home or something. This cash doesn't become available to the bank from which it was withdrawn because it's taken out of the banking sector altogether. Even in the case where the was redeposited in another bank, the lack of an active interbank market means that there still isn't any way for the original bank to borrow money. So this naturally leads to the question of why isn't there an active interbank market? And I think that the number one reason is this first one, that if the cash doesn't return to the banking sector, then there's no particular presumption that there are enough funds within the banking sector for the banks with deficits to borrow the amount that they need overnight. And this is, you can see an obvious case of this, given that most households don't have a bank account. Anytime a firm pays its employees, it's going to withdraw cash. It's going to withdraw physical cash from its bank account and give the cash to the employee, and the employee is going to keep the cash. That is not banking sector, or at least not right away. And then you've also got other problems. If you're going to have an active interbank market, you certainly will have to have the state sector banks involved. But then you have the problem that state sector banks may not be conducive to good risk management. You may find that instead of lending overnight in this way that an interbank market ordinarily functions, you might find that the state banks were lending rates to a liquidity crisis. So it would be perhaps not even a good idea to have the state sector banks involved if the counterparty risk involved with the interbank market wasn't going to be properly evaluated by those banks. And finally, I think particularly for example, foreign Iraqi branches of foreign banks, they might find that the counterparty risk of dealing with some of the local banks, rightly or wrongly, they might judge that counterparty risk to be honest. Now, I'm afraid if I run out of my 10 minutes. 2 minutes?
Yes.
All right. Anyway, I think these can be gone through quite quickly. It's the main point is the foreign investor needs to understand, or that should be explained to him, is that the average ISX-listed bank is more than a typical foreign bank would have of the difficult borrowing over. The Iraqi bank needs not just the expected value of net risk scenario. So I think this is why you see that the listed banks, cash is well managed. It's not, and that if you were to see that cash was very, that's is anything else here? Well, of course, the other thing is all other things on equity is going. Return on equity is going to be lower because the average ISX listed bank has lower leverage. So you have like some differences in if you're comparing financial ratios with banks in other countries. There's some adjustments in the foreign investors' expectations that should be made. And that surely is all the time I have. So thanks very much. And if anyone would like to read more on this topic, check out my my article from last year. It's on the website of the Institute of Regional and International Studies at the American University of Iraq in Suleimania. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mark. I think that piece, and I'll definitely recommend. Our next speaker is Grant. Am I saying it right? Fine, the Iraqis will have me, not myself. And he's going to be speaking. No, go ahead. Please go ahead. I'm trying to be as brief as possible.
Thank you, and I just want to say thanks to the organizers, and particularly I think this is a great idea. This ISX thing to be doing after a rough couple of years. I think this is a great idea to get together and share what some good ideas are, what we can be doing going forward to develop capital markets. Okay, so in my brief time, what I'll do is go through where I see the investment case for Iraq today, and then offer some recommendations for how we can develop the market further. So, Iraq's central challenge is that $1 billion a year next year, $70 billion a year. Our view is that for foreign investment into the country, between 50 and 100 billion dollars could be channeled through the ISX into Iraq to fund next 5. We all know this. This is we've seen this before today. Even Iraq's capital market as a percent of GDP. This is the stock exchange. It's one of the smallest in the world. There's tremendous growth potential. Also a reflection of Iraq's financial sector. This is credit as a percent of GDP. People are still off the grid. They're underbanked. The potential that we have. What Iraq is not receiving its fair share of equity inflows. So net capital 2000 and 2014. It's pretty much the trio. So the Iraq fund, when we launched the fund in 2010, it's based on 2 ideas: one would grow, and the second was that earnings in Iraq would come true. Production has nearly doubled, and earnings have nearly tripled. Despite that, Iraq is in a bear market. The market's down 67% from peak to trough, and the market is priced as if it will never be developed, ISIS never leaves, and earnings never grow. And so, in fact, none of that is true. If we look at oil production, this is since 2005, despite all the noise coming from Iraq and also all the talking heads in the West, you can't turn on the TV without some state. This doesn't look like a failed state. Iraqi oil production is up 3 times since 2005. Similar profile. Is driving money supply. Growth. The last what we've seen is we've seen equities. This is in the rush. The single most important indicator we looked at was money supply, because that would tell you how much excess liquidity is in the system, and some of that would end up on. Here we see Russian oil production, Russian money RTS index. This can happen in Iraq too. There's no reason it can't. At the same time, we've got private consumption. This is non-oil economic development. It's growing over the next, through 2021, 55% growth in private consumption. All of this is very helpful for equity in Pakistan right here. There's no reason this can happen in Baghdad. Right? You have every ingredient. Whether there was a custodian, I don't think that's the case. I've changed my mind. After speaking to literally hundreds of institutional investors, over the last 5 years, they want clarity over stock, and they do not have that. custodian into Iraq, people will come, investors will come. We saw this again in Russia. The custodians arrived in the 90s, and that laid the foundation for what happened later. This couldn't happen if these custodians weren't in the market already. You couldn't have seen this market performance in Russia. All right, the second recommendation, listings. I know everyone at the ISX is focused on this, and there's been a lot of work recently with listing banks and the exchange houses. We need more listings. There needs to be a broader market for people to invest in. And Iraq has many privately held companies that are extremely well-run businesses. I've met with many of them, and the challenge is to convince the owners to list. There's not an equity culture in Iraq where people take a business. My exit is to go public. That doesn't happen yet. The inclination is to keep it close into the family. So how do we to list their stock on the exchange? We looked at Brazil in the 1960s and 70s. They used tax incentives. They gave generous tax breaks to companies and generous tax breaks to investors in IPOs to list on the Brazilian stock exchange. And what that did is nearly triple the number of listings in Brazil over the space of a few years. I recognize that tax may not be the most direct incentive to provide in Iraq, but I think it's an idea and it's a way to start building what we call the equity culture, where you can have, again, tax breaks if firms list 20% on the ISX, a tax holiday for several years, and again, individuals could also reinvest income into the ISX tax-free. All right, my third recommendation is probably the most important. The next one is probably the one that can make the biggest difference. Listing a stake in a state bank. As Mark mentioned just now, Iraq has these large state-owned banks, are well understood, some are not well understood. TBI understood bank. You could offer terms to domestic Iraqi investors. We saw this of a state bank where they get rush shares that would bring people across Iraq into the trade and ownership class. Proceeds would go very less from Russia with 20 people retention and bring a custodian. That's it. It would be phenomenal. And if you look at the reason why people like banks and the ultimate goal should be to have the ISX reflect the Iraqi economy. And you can't do that without having the state banks listed. Just a few more ideas. A lot of other emerging markets have listed the operating subsidiaries of multinationals that operate in their countries. So in Pakistan, you've got Nestle, Colgate, Philip Morris. Those companies, in as much as they work in Pakistan, are on the exchange. The same in Nigeria, Malaysia, Indonesia. There are companies that qualify for this in Iraq. You could list GE, I think has a critical mass of business in Iraq under a separate operating subsidiary that could list on the ISX. And again, these kind of stocks are very popular among all kinds of investors, and they form a very strong core of the exchange. Investors are attracted to recognized brands, and the more high quality companies that are listed, the better the exchange. Let's jump ahead. Okay, trading suspensions, and I know this was written before the news last week, and I applaud result that the suspensions have been shortened even further last week to just a few days. Our goal should be technology, and we have the infrastructure to do that. Suspensions create illiquidity, they create uncertainty, they create valuation issues for investors. If you have a stock suspended for a long period of time, it's hard to value if it's suspended. And so we should work toward making suspensions as rare as possible. Two more. And Isaac mentioned this, and I couldn't agree more. Right now you have bonus shares issued, and it works both ways. If the stock is below a dinar, nobody buys it. If it's above a dinar, everyone wants to buy it because they can then just flip it and make a quick buck or a quick dinar. And it creates distortions. New stock should be issued at the last market price. The current practice dilutes, it harms shareholders, it bloats the capital structure. You have too many shares in the structure to begin with. And it only benefits people who are on the inside who can access these cheap shares and then flip them at a higher price. You see this wave of selling after each bonus share issuance. So the question is, why would you misprice capital if you don't have to? And I understand you have to rewrite the law and it's a complicated process, but let's put this on the list of things that we can do to make the exchange more efficient. The last one is that we should all work to try to arrange to raise the profile of the ISX. I think the current team has done an extraordinary job doing so, and I applaud them for it. But I think a visit by the governor of the CBI or the prime minister would show people that this is a core part of Iraqi society. This is something that everyone should be involved in. It's not a gambling den where it's all mysterious and smoky. It's a place where people can go and invest for the long term and generate wealth. To the extent we can raise the profile of the ISX through visits by leaders of the country, that would be a good thing. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Grant. These were excellent points, and I think as a competing fund, so to speak, I think it's wonderful ideas that what you presented. I think the next point is pleasure to present safe about we're going to address the higher profile for companies through investor relations. Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here, and I just wanted to thank everyone for having us here, saying they're having Mustafa here is asking as Khatem. So actually part of what I do is to have multiple hats. As Khatem one day is in Iraq, I also being I've been in Iraq for Khatem for 4.5 years right now. I've overseen the IPO listing throughout the process and through many challenges with many people who I'm seeing over here. A few things about best practices and how we would been CEO, CFO, and board of directors. So the idea is to be directly in touch with the media outlets, directly in touch with the stakeholders around, and at the same time be directly in touch with management and key decision makers within the company, so we can deliver the right messages when they're required. So just a little brief about IR. What is IR? I think first of all, it's very important to know that investor relations cannot improve the share price. Sometimes certain managements think that an investor relations guy sitting in touch with the stock exchange can alter the share price because they're bringing in different information. That's something that cannot happen. However, investor relations is a function that combines different functions within the company, and it delivers. It is the true official outlet for the company where you can information that is required through shareholders and any other entities. This is just a kind of scope of what we do on a daily basis. It's quite a bit of work working with different departments on different levels. Legally, we're obliged by the stock exchange and by the regulator itself to deliver the AGMs, deliver our releases, financial results, and all sorts of different disclosures, should there be any material information. We also work across different people, like the company registration department. See some people over here that I've met before in the past. I work with finance all day, every day, trying to see what our results would be, what our projections should be, what they should look like in the future, and how we can project a true vision of what the accounts should look like. Corporate commissions, media comes around all the time. We have to speak. We have to have an official voice where we liaise with all the media outlets to try to raise the profile of the company as well and present our equity story. Something I'll come back to. And finally, work with board of directors. Lots of decision making. It's a big company. It doesn't have to be. It can be a smaller company. It's just you need to be coaching and working with the executive management themselves to try and bring in the story of the company towards where it should be. In terms of best practice, there are certain minimal requirements that we have to look at, and I think we try to, and Zain Iraq in Qatar, we try to adhere to these minimal requirements as much as possible because we do belong to a bigger shareholder, which is Zain Group. They have much bigger base, a much more diverse shareholder base, and we work together in liaison with them to try to make sure that we are always, first of all, precise. And we're a big company. We've gone through, many of you know, some very lots of legal issues and court cases and so on in Iraq, and I think it's very important for us to always ensure that we deliver in a timely manner. So our disclosures and how prompt they are going to the stock exchange ensures that we're delivering a true meaning to what the company is saying. Integrity. People that I work with are kind of exposed to what the company is doing, what it's performing, where it's actually doing well, and other places where it's not doing well. It's very important for us to ensure that this kind of information is not leaked out. We have to ensure that if we have any kind of crisis or if we have any kind of issue, that these types of things need to be taken into consideration in a proper way, and what needs to be taken out to the public needs to be addressed very firmly. And finally, standardization. So, like I said, we work throughout Zain Group. Zain Group is a very large company. They have a standard process for all of these types of things, and we try to adhere to that type of thing as well, such as reporting our accounts in IFRS. We do present our accounts in Iraqi GAAP, but I think that will come back into my recommendations a bit later on. In terms of prioritizing what's good and what we should be looking at and how we can present our equity story in terms of what the company should present, I think it's very important for the companies listed on the Iraqi Stock Exchange to understand that developing such a function would actually deliver them to the international markets. And I think going to what Grant is saying in terms of custodian banks, yes, that is important, but let's try to deal and develop what we have already here in Iraq that we can do already. So if we look at how we prioritize things, investor community, whether the investors are retail investors, small investors, or very large investors, we need to be addressable. We need them to address us at any point. We need to be in communication with them. Back to what Aisha said as well. It takes them 1 month. You said, I think, or something to get back to you. The company positioning. I think we have some excellent companies listed on the Iraqi Stock Exchange, and some of them don't understand how big of a value that they represent in terms of the economy and the culture itself. So some of the biggest banks you find in Iraq don't understand what the other banks are actually doing to level themselves with the rest of the banks or other banks, for example, within the region. So just to kind of understand their peers, their peer groups, have comparables, have comparing. It's always great to kind of position themselves as leaders of such a market. Transparency, an issue that is very much lacking in Iraq in terms of what the companies want to deliver. I think not having any transparency because they're actually scared what they should be delivering. What they're trying to do is just to deliver of information to they need to understand that being transparent is actually going to include and it's going to expose larger investors across the world. And to have a long-term strategy, of course. The investor relations department with the management needs to explain what their long-term strategy is. So, if certain company X is making good amounts of money today, so all this falls into the future potential of how the company can be developed. This is something that we have to look into in a very more important way. Disclosures. There's 2 types of disclosures. Mandatory disclosures that we're required by, and I think the ISX and the ISC have been very clear about what they need to be delivering. And then you have the voluntary disclosures. We need to be more transparent again to build the credibility of the company in terms of what they need to deliver. I'm going to be rushing into this very quickly. I'm just trying to identify material and we actually use disclosures when they are volunteered. This is just a set of certain things that need to be looked into. I think one very important one, for example, is the internal-external crisis, Iraq political crisis. So when we had the ISIS invasions in Mosul back in June 2014, a lot of the foreign investors took their money out of the stock exchange. Had there been proper disclosures about the operations of some of the companies, it wouldn't have been as damaging as it was to say, for example, our operations don't actually work in Mosul, or they're not affected by certain operations, and many other things that could trigger material information. Finally, we put in just a set of recommendations. And I'll be very happy to deliver this to Sabah later on. When we're back in Baghdad. I think the ISX has been very open-minded in what they're trying to do, and there's a lot that can be done, and we can try to push in only to have lobbying for greater transparency. I think working with the ISC, we can kind of enforce this kind of transparency to be delivered by these companies and not just make it as a basic requirement. Enforcing prompt delivery of information as well. I think many companies go through lawsuits every day in Iraq and none of them even want to speak about them because they don't understand what's material and what's not, or just another small lawsuit for them or another It's not something that they see important. IFRS accounting. Yes, we have our own Iraqi GAAP accounting standards, but there's no harm in ensuring that all companies on the stock exchange should abide by IFRS, and this way we'll be on par with the rest of the stock exchanges around the region, most of them at least. We can deliver training in order to develop IR departments. Training, I think some of the Middle East Investor Relations Society were said they're very happy to deliver training for some of the people. That'd be also a good idea. Media follow-up. This is always something great because having the media ensures that there is a trustworthy, accountable stock exchange and companies. So greater dialogue and communication. And then finally, of course, developing an IR, for example, website, going back to what Aisha was saying, ensuring having all the information that is required over there, whether it's accounting, back to BOD decisions, and so on. And thank you very much. Thank you. I think we should have a lot more say, so we should clone it at other companies because we did investor relations. I think as a private customer in other markets worldwide, investor relations is the gate earlier that we want to be very important to the exchange, but without startups or without funds for startups, there are no new listings in a way. And any economy startups of the economy. So it's a very pleasure to present. We'll go over the presentations and try to make it as brief as possible to remain the time. So basically, let me try to build the case why everyone here should be looking as for the ISS. Entrepreneurship and starting this value. Obviously, create growth. With economic growth comes also given that startups that we are in the industry, it also builds resilience and very proud of what they're doing. As startups becoming there with creating value added to it. Specifically, if we look at the penetration of Indian population, typically 7% of the adult population, and if we try to segregate there are two groups. Two groups of countries that we can cross GDP growth with entrepreneurial activity. As you can notice, countries activity because of necessity. So they end up starting companies. However, these companies are typically low in value addition. As we move towards more innovation and high contribution to the economy, and therefore we start having more wealth to the people. What I'm trying to say is startups will ultimately help the Iraqi economy move from a necessity factor-driven economy to more of an innovation and value-added economy. If a lot of in the room consider startups for the returns. On average, if we look at the long-term VC returns, we can note over the 20, 25, 30-year long-term, there's a significant difference between just investing in public markets and VC investments. That said, obviously, VC investment is a risky asset class. I'm sure the asset managers around here will be able to allocate the right proportions to other investors. So what? I guess most of the startups have on the top of their list access to finance. That's true in the UN as it is from here, and obviously in Iraq. So we have been the best go-to party in order to raise funds for startups, and that's for multiple reasons. The risk profile is not the proper one. The track record and profitability of startups are not adequate, and it's reflective of actually also on SMEs, only on startup yet, but even on SMEs. And a loan to the total capital that is given to by banks is quite low compared to even middle-income countries or high-income countries. There's a lot that the banks that are here today can do in order to help fund SMEs and ultimately grow it into startups. But that said, again, banks are not the right venue. And from an equity perspective, if we're not taking loans, we're taking equity perspective, there's a financing gap, especially in the region and Iraq as well. So we see a gap in terms of funding the entrepreneurs who have different requirements, and we see that the current funding environment is not adequate versus also what traditional investors are also looking for. So traditional investors who invest in public markets look for typically either steady dividends, transparency, and financial results, which is typically not available from startups. So what can we do? Let's look a little bit at the MENA region. I'll go through that very quickly, and then try to derive lessons learned for Iraq. So the entrepreneur starts his journey, with an idea, and then they go through specific junctures all along the way, which are decisive in the journey and the evolution of startups. These junctures implicitly mean there are key questions and key evolutionary steps that entrepreneurs go through. And these junctures are also reflective of the reduced risk that startups go through. Therefore, there are specific types of investments or investors, I should say, that are suited for different stages of the company. Before jumping to the investors, let's look at the funding models. Remember also that you have different industries, and different industries have different growth rates and what we call the J-curve. J-curve is really the cumulative operating profits of companies as they develop. You notice that some of the traditional industries might have shorter development cycles, so the funding requirement is less. Therefore, we can find investment coming. These companies are typically self-invested, self-funded, and then you have more high growth and capital-intensive industries that require much more risk capital. And go directly here. So, what are the different stages? We can go to a seed stage at the beginning, where the company is still at the idea level. It's developing the product that it has. Typically, this is funded at the beginning with family, friends, and angel investors, followed by early stage. The early stage not profitable, so again, banks cannot offer funding there. We're talking here about VC investment that comes into play, and then going to growth stage and later maturity. At these stages, VCs still play a role. Banks can come in. It can go to private equities or the public markets. So there is a route to IPO. Investments that have happened over the past year, 2016, just to let you know that the market is actually quite significant. Over $800 million have been invested in startups just last year, in 2016, in the MENA region. Most of it has happened actually in the UAE,
Lebanon, Jordan, and Egypt are are running, a close battle against each other. Most of it has been in early stage investments, so companies that are just starting. Of investment in later stage investments, so companies that are growing, and they've been mostly led by VCs and corporate ventures, such as the big telecom companies. The companies are receiving 80% of the capital. That's the $1.2 billion just 8 startups across the region. As for the investor landscape, grow also in Iraq. Early stage companies, early stage investors, late stage investors, and private and family offices. Interestingly, also on a national level, a lot of sovereign wealth funds are starting to join the fray in terms of investing in early stage companies. So, for instance, we can look at PIF, so the Public Investment Fund in Saudi Arabia that invested in, if I recall correctly, etc., etc. So, given that Iraq also can build similar sovereign wealth fund, it can also consider this as one potential avenue. Sure. Before concluding, just a few more ideas. So on MENA, one of the key challenges for VC investments is exits. There has been exits that we have seen over the past few years, over 30 actually. However, some of them, most of them have been trade sales, acqui-hires, or secondary sales to other private equity. We had IPO is a lot of value add to Iraqi startups. And whenever you raise money, spend it wisely and try to improve on transparency. On the financial sector, there's a lot we can do in order to encourage startups. Improve on financial market efficiency through transparency to other actions. Broaden the tools that offer investors new securities, new financial instruments in order to be able to accommodate the risk that early stage investors are taking. And for the community at large, if I need to point one thing, I'd say nurture the culture of entrepreneurship. With this, thank you, everyone. Vital things, and let's go find the experiences of the other
exchanges, the weekly stock exchange is on the top with 440. It is at the end of 2016 years and representing 40% of the market cap of the region. Then Qatar Stock Exchange, Abu Dhabi. Let's have a look on, for example, Beirut Stock Exchange, $11 billion, and then we have Iraq Stock Exchange around 7.7 or $7.8 billion as market capitalization end of 2016, representing 0.7% of the total market cap of the region. Because of Saudi market, Qatar market, and Abu Dhabi, so the other exchanges look so small compared to those exchanges. Not only the Iraqi exchange, I mean. For the value of shares traded, we can see that Saudi stock market presented $308 billion of value of traded shares, representing 73% of the total of the market value of transaction for the region. And with just to compare the comparable, let's see, for example, Beirut Stock Exchange, $972 million, Tunisia 760, Palestine 445, Iraq Stock Exchange 404 million dollars trading per year. Real percentages that we are representing the challenges for us in the region. We can see that turnover velocity, let me just give an idea about the turnover velocity represents the value of shares traded over the market capitalization. So if we can see here that the most liquid exchanges in the region are Saudi market, which represent like 69% of turnover velocity. If I want to give you an idea of the international turnover velocity ratio, it should be between 80 to 100, 110. This is the average, maybe 70 to 120 if we want to give more wider idea. But which gives us that Saudi Stock Exchange is the only one which is for the time being in the range of, and can be considered as a liquid exchange. Egyptian 50% because of what happened with the Egyptian pound. So people were buying the stocks to avoid the valuation of the Egyptian pound. Dubai, and if we go to the comparable, let's talk about Tunisia 9%, Casablanca 8%, Beirut 8%, Muscat 5%, Iraq 5%. So we have a lack of liquidity for all our exchanges. I'm saying that is to not just accuse certain exchanges like in the Levant region, because most of the Arab exchanges are having a lack of liquidity, except Saudi Stock Exchange. So the reasons behind this lack of liquidity, I want to just talk to you without looking at this the slides. When I was talking with several analysts, and on the media we are listening and seeing several of those analysts giving several reasons for this the drop of liquidity, the lack of liquidity. Some of them, they were saying summer vacation or the Ramadan fasting, anticipation of Federal rate hike decision, European crisis, and all those. But in fact, and many other legitimate reasons, when we say that during the uptrend we have liquidity, in fact, all analysts and technical analysts, they believe that 2/3 of the time we spend them in correction and horizontal consolidation. Does it mean we should accept that we'll have a lack of liquidity, the 2/3 of cycle, and the solution is that securities lending and borrowing. We need short selling to allow all investors and the traders on the market to have an activity during the corrections and the consolidation. Also, we've made a lot of trials to list ETF, gives a lot of studies prove that we have the nationals, they need the direct market access to our market to really be interested in investing and trading, not only investing, trading. We need them to make volume, and for this they need direct market access. The online trading is very important. Now we have it in our region. It should be encouraged because some studies proved, and I made some study on this, with online trading, over the phone you can make one deal, and over the online trading you can make 30 deals. For each 30 deals with online trading, you make only one deal over the phone with your broker. By the time taking your phone, calling him, should I buy, should I sell? It takes time, maybe you change your mind. Just by clicking, we can buy and sell, and this is why online trading is very important. And finally, the algorithmic trading is still very too early for some markets to apply the algorithmic trading. But once we have a little bit of liquidity, you can start also using algorithmic trading. We've been talking with internationals. Agree that algorithmic trading, they help a lot, having a lot of liquidity on each market and any market. I have only, I have no time. Okay, thank you. 48 seconds. Thank you very much, I think, last but not least, it's been a great pleasure to introduce Wasim Jisrawi and Rami Swabini to talk about the role of the Iraqi broker in implementing the required changes for the future. Wasim, please.
Okay. السلام عليكم. احنا كان المفروض ان نقدم البرزنتيشن هذا 3 معالي واحمد واستغربت، بس لضيق الوقت ولسرعه راح نقدمها بشكل سريع على الافكار الرئيسيه اللي احنا نشوفها من خلال هذا المؤتمر لاصحاب القرار الموجودين اليوم، انه شنو احتياجات الوسيط حتى يقدم خدماته بشكل كامل. بشكل عام لسبب وجود الحاجه الى النقد، توفرت الحاجه الى وجود اسواق المال. اللي انقسمت دورها الى قسمين، الى سوق النقد وسوق راس المال. ودكتور محمود بصراحه اليوم قدم لنا برزنتيشن حلو على الخدمات اللي يقدمها البنك المركزي فيما يخص سوق المال او العفو سوق النقد. واحنا راح نكون الثاني، راح نشبه الكلام الطرف الثاني اللي هو سوق راس المال. سوق راس المال اللي يتعامل مع تداول الاسهم والسندات، واللي تعتبر شركات الوسط واحده من اهم المفاصل للسوق، لان هي اللي تكون على تماس مع المستثمر، وهي اللي تكون على اتصال مع المستثمر اللي يقدم له خدمات الوساطه. بشكل عام خدمات الوساطه بالنسبه الى مساحه العمل اللي يعمل فيها الوسيط العراقي، حددها القانون، قانون الاوراق الماليه، بانه شركات الوساطه متخصصه في نشاط الوساطه واداره الاستثمارات وتقديم الاستشارات الاستثماريه. طبعا الاستشارات الاستثماريه لازم تكون من خلال ريسيرش، من خلال قسم متخصص بالبحث، ريكومنديشن للمستثمر في كيفيه الشراء والبيع والى اخره. اغلب شركات الوساطه اليوم تقدم خدمات جدا قليل هذا، وجزء قليل جدا من هذه الخدمات اللي هي التعامل مع العملاء نيابه عنهم في عمليات البيع والشراء من دون اعطاء اي ريكومنديشن على الاداء على شركه او شركتين تقدم ريسيرش في هذا الموضوع. لذلك كان حجم او اسلوب تطويرنا لخدمات شركاتنا فقط كان جانب مجال واحد، واللي هو التعامل من خلال اونلاين تريد. فالكل يعرف انه خلال الفتره الاخيره تم اعتماد تعليمات جديده حتى نطلق عمليات التداول من خلال التداول عبر الانترنت، واللي نعتقد انه راح تحقق لنا شبكه واسعه من خلال التعامل مع شركات الاتصالات، وهي نيو كونكشنز، يعني راح يكون اكو اتصالات جديده مع المستثمرين بسبب حتى نقدر ناخذ قاعده اكبر من المستثمرين، بدل ما يكونوا فقط في بغداد، ممكن يكون قاعده عملائنا العالم كله. بس حتى ننفذ هذا الكلام احنا بحاجه الى بعض الامور اللي تساعدنا في هذا المجال، واللي راح نذكرها ضمن الريكومنديشن مع المواضيع في الوقت الحاضر. ضمن معادله 80-20 احنا اليوم تطوير مجال عملنا كوسطاء كان على ال 20% اللي هم التعامل الريتيلز، واللي هم المستثمرين الصغار. نعتقد انه حتى نطور مجال عمل السوق وعمل الوسيط نحتاج انه ندخل في مجال التعامل مع المستثمر الكبير، لانه بالوقت الحاضر اكثر من 80% بين 70 إلى 80% من حجم التداول السنوي هو معتمد على البيج كلاينتس او الاوامر الخاصه او السبيشال ديلز. لحد الان احنا ما عندنا الاكسس لكيفيه تنفيذ هذا الديل، سواء عمليه تنفيذها من خلال السوق، عمليات التفاوض وكل الاجراءات اللي تتم القانونيه تم خارج السوق، وياتي العملاء للسوق فقط لاجراء عمليه التنفيذ، يعني كانه تحولنا الى مؤسسه لنقل الملك. وهذا احنا اللي مركزنا، احنا كنا نفترض انه هذا السوق هو سوق راس المال، كنا نحاول. واليوم سالت الدكتور محمود اذا اكو امكانيه اصدار من خلال السوق. من رجعت للقانون، هل عندنا هذا المنفذ؟ نعم، المنفذ موجود، احنا اللي ما تعاملنا به وقصرنا بهذا الموضوع وتركناه لفتره طويله. احنا عندنا الماده 55 رابعا من قانون الشركات تسمح باصدار الاسهم من خلال السوق، وهذا راح يكون منفذ جديد لعمليات تكون زياده راس المال من خلال السوق وبالقيمه السوقيه وليست بالقيمه الاسميه، والفقره واضحه وموجوده بالقانون. كل اللي نحتاجه انه نبدي نحاول انه نعمل على هذا الموضوع حتى نقدر نتخلص من هذه المشكله. انا اعتقد من خلال هذا الموضوع ممكن انه نزيد حجم تداولنا احتمال عشرات المرات او احتمال مئات المرات، زائدا نفتح فرصه جديده ومنتجات جديده تخلق عمل لشركات الوساطه، بالاضافه الى التعامل داخل السوق. احتياجات المستثمرين الاجانب صراحه حطيت على رامز، هو راح يتكلم بها شيء بسيط بس دقيقتين، اللي هو مش يفترض الاجانب الشركات الوساطه اللي موجوده تتعامل وياهم. فراح احكي بس على حلول اللي نعتقد انه راح تكون جدا مناسبه مدى قصير على كل ما تكلمنا من مشاكل.
I'm sorry, I'm going to speak in English because my Arabic is not as good. Though Iraq is the most promising market in terms of equities in the region today. I believe that there are few things that are necessary for the market to encourage both individual and institutional investors. Everybody's talked about the global custodian, and that's a very important part. The clearing bank, having a better clearing bank or multiple clearing banks. For institutional investors to invest in any company, they need the timely reporting from the listed companies in a form like the IFRS that gives them a good indication of how the companies are doing. It's not expected of an investor, institutional investor, come invest in a company that has only shown the results of their 2015. So that's very important. Research can only be done, as Bill has said, if reporting is done timely. And for the research to be done, what needs to be done is for the brokers and the ISX to join together to create an institute that actually trains research analysts in Iraq to create that industry of security analysis. Another idea that comes to mind is the idea of allowing institutional investors in Iraq, encouraging them to invest in equities and bonds, things like the pension fund and the social security. Those are the ideas that I've put together in a very short manner. I hope that this has been useful. Once all this stuff is done, the inclusion of Iraq in the emerging market indices will give a big boost to the country. That only can be done after the previous points have been raised. Thank you.
For our solutions او ما نتوقع انه ممكن ان يحل بعض مشاكلنا او يشجع او يزيد من حجم تداولنا. نعتقد انه اولا بحاجه احنا الى تطوير نوعيه المعلومات اللي تقدمها الشركات واللي تساعدنا في اجراء عمليات التحليل لتقديم استشارات حقيقيه وصحيحه الى المستثمر. الشفافيه وامكانيه الوصول للتناسق هي نوع المعلومات اكيد هي معايير عامه. احنا اللي نحتاج الى طريقه الوصول الى هذه المعلومات اللي هي اوريدي موجوده، حاليا موجود عندنا موقع الكتروني، موجود عندنا مباشر شغال بيسو، بس حجم المعلومات اللي ينطيها غير كافيه لاجراء اي عمليه تحليل او مقارنه، او صعبه جدا لاجراءها حتى نقدر نقدم استشاره صحيحه بالوقت المناسب من حجم تعاملاتنا. الحلول البديله للبنك الضامن، احنا نعرف موضوع البنك الضامن موضوع ازلي، وانا واحد من الاشخاص اللي اشتغلت مره ومرتين وثلاثه على هذا الموضوع وفشلنا بالثلاث مرات لاسباب الكل يعرفها. لحد الان ما حطينا الحلول النهائيه لهذا الموضوع. اذا كان غير موجود البنك الضامن، احنا نعرف انه هو ليس السبب الوحيد يدخل الاستثمارات الاجنبيه اللي هي اوريدي موجوده، اكو اليوم صناديق استثمار شغاله بالعراق مع عدم وجود البنك الضامن. فاللي نحتاجه للامد القصير انه نلقى حلول بديله للبنك الضامن، واللي احنا كل اللي راح نحتاجه من عندهم فقط انه يضمنوا لنا موضوع حقوق الاصدار، رايت ايشوز اللي هي خاصه بعمليات زياده راس المال وعمليات الاسهم المجانيه، كيفيه اصدارها وكيفيه تمويلها وكيفيه معالجتها، وبالنقطه الثانيه عمليه تحصيل الارباح اللي يواجه بها اغلب المستثمرين من خلال القوانين والتعليمات الموجوده الحاليه اللي ما تسمح للوسيط باستلام ارباح المستثمر او تحصيلها، خاصه المستثمرين اللي هم خارج العراق سواء اجانب او غير اجانب. بظل وجود هيك حلول ممكن على الاقل نتلافى موضوع البنك الضامن لفتره بحيث ما نكمل ما بعده. البنيه التحتيه للسوق. بالنسبه الى عمليات ايقاف تداول الشركات اللي احنا نعتقد احنا ثلاثه نقول كنا يعني متفقين انه هي عمليه معاقبه للمستثمر وعمليه معاقبه للسوق ولا الوسيط وليس للشخص المعني اللي هي الشركه اللي ما اصدرت البيانات في الوقت المناسب. فايقاف تداول الشركات اعتقد يراد اعاده النظر به بطريقه انه الشركه ما تتوقف عن التداول لسبب انه مجلس ادارتها هو غير قادر على ايفاء متطلبات السوق. النقطه الثانيه تفعيل المستوى الثاني من خدمات نظام التداول. شركات الوساطه خلال نظام الاكستريم ومن قبل الاومكس احنا استعملنا النظام بمستوى الاول. اعتقد احنا اليوم بحاجه انه لتفعيل المستوى الثاني اللي هو يعطينا الامكانيه انه نفتح مثلا نيغوشيشن ديل اللي راح تحل لنا مشكله المستثمرين، بعض المستثمرين الكبار او بعض الاوردرات اللي في جدا محدده اللي احنا غير قادرين انه ندخلها على السيستم بطريقه الحقيقيه بحيث تكون العمليه مؤثره على المستثمر عمليه البيع، لانه من ضمن مواصفات النظام الحالي يتقبل كميات محدوده باسعار معينه ضمن بوك معين. فاذا فتحنا اوردر بوك جديد ضمن نيغوشيشن ديل اللي هو اوردر موجود اعتقد راح يحل لنا بعض المشاكل الموجوده. للمدى الطويل اعتقد موضوع النظام الكل حكى به واللي هو الكوستاديان بانك، وماكو واحد ما يعرف شنو اهميته، واكثر المستثمرين يطلبوا بعيد الموضوع. اللي نحتاجه فقط بنك التسويه. يحتاج اليوم من متطلبات عملنا انه بنك التسويه او الكليرنس بانك انه يكون بنك قوي ذات امكانيات كبيره، يكون متصل مع شبكه واسعه من المراسلين حتى نقدر نوصل الى كل المستثمرين الموجودين داخليا وخارجيا بنفس المستوى، مستوى الخدمات. اصدار تقارير دوريه وشهريه اللي هو نفس الانفورميشن نحاول نطورها بحيث تكون تقديرات الارباح واصدار التقارير الريسيرش بشكل اوسع وافضل. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much all for listening to us. I think we have some wonderful ideas. Sadly, we don't have time. Do we have time for questions? No, sadly, we don't have more questions, but hopefully the gentleman here will be available for one-on-one questions afterwards. We have one final session, which is a panel discussion to be chaired by Jawad Alawi, who is the Managing Director at the Frontier Exchange. Jawad?
Hello everyone. It's my privilege to be organising and to be discussing the foreign institutional perspective within Iraq. My background is over a decade of institutional investment in emerging and frontier markets. I've had the privilege of working with Ahmed in Iraq in the past, and he's taught us a lot about Iraq so far. And yes, I think we should get the ball rolling. I want to make it interactive as possible with the audience this session. Please put some guidelines, but as many questions as possible. They'll be most welcome. And also, as everyone else has said again, I'd like to thank Iraq Stock Exchange Farmer, the central bank, and sponsors for this excellent event so far. So without further ado, I'd like to reintroduce Ahmed from Asia Frontier Capital. Yes, please. Ahmed has many prominent roles in the past, including director of NBK Capital. He was head of institutional sales at W.R. Ambrecht and Company. He has many degrees, particularly in mathematics from Oxford, and he's a proud Iraqi and British old as well. I'd also like to introduce Alison Graham from Bolton Capital Management and has over 20 years of emerging market and frontier market finance. She's worked in Latin equities and Caspian securities, as well as in Moscow for the United Financial Group. And she currently is the CIO at Voltan in their advisory business and trading across the funds universe. She's, from what I gather, speaks over 6 languages to hear what they are. Furthermore, reintroduce Grant from Euphrates, the principal. He's been in Iraq since his origins in the global institution sector, and he was a partner at Hermitage Capital Management. And he also has a law degree, he passed the bar in New York. He's got a PA in economics and Russian studies from Yale. And he's worked and served on many investment funds throughout UK and Europe. And also reintroduce again Mark from Contrarian Capital, principal. He's worked in the past for Peregrine Brokerage, with that company represented as well in Shenzhen. He attended University of Hawaii and got a PhD in economics, and I feel we should now start referring to him as Dr. Mark, which he's failed to inform us about. And last but not least, Saad Senna from Northern California, the co-founder. He's one of the biggest and longest established funds within Iraq, and one of their largest funds, best performing. He's worked on a number of deals in Iraq and Kurdistan, including real estate, banking, insurance sector, telecom, and he's raised capital for quite a few oil field companies. He's worked in the past for the United Nations in Brazil, as well as Story and Miller Group in New York. But I think I'll start with a nice, easygoing question for the panel. I'd like to ask actually directly to what brought you to Iraq in the first place, your experience in Iraq, and particularly the Iraq Stock Exchange.
Sure, thank you. So I was coming to Iraq from the Russian market, and Russia had just experienced an amazing decade-long re-rating where if you put $1 into the Russian market in 1995, you walked away with $40 in 2006, 2007. And so I was looking for the next market to do that, and for a market to generate those kind of returns, it has to be misunderstood and it has to be uncrowded. So there can't be a lot of other people there already. And in 2010, 2011, in the West, all you would hear about Iraq is that it's a failed state, that it's going to fall apart tomorrow and it's going to descend into this war landscape. At the same time, you heard the occasional headline about Iraqi oil production rising, and you thought these both can't be true. Either it's a failed state or it's not, because oil production is rising, and you can't really grow oil production in a failed state. So we looked at it more closely and realized that robust stock exchange, you've got a great infrastructure, and this would be, our view is that this is the next market that can really emerge into something special. It's got the skill to grow, and there's no reason, as we discussed earlier, why Iraq can't be one of the great emerging markets in the world. So that was the perspective that I came.
I'd like to extend the same question to Mark, actually, and all the other panelists who entered Iraq back in the day.
Basically, this same answer as Grant's. We specifically thought that the Iraqi case had a lot of compelling parallels with Russia in the early 1990s, and so pretty much the same idea that Grant's talking about, that the potential is clearly here for this to turn into the Russian market of the 90s, or the Sri Lankan market of the last decade, or there are many parallels we can find where market emerges very rapidly over the course of a few years from zero to being a major stock exchange. Of course, the